Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever in the world you are connecting from today. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you're having a fun time and a fun Friday. If not a busy one, probably being the end of the week and being in HR, of course, and being almost at the end of the year. Most likely, it is a very busy Friday. Thank you so much, everybody, for connecting to this Hacking HR live chat conversation. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we have done this series of conversations with book authors, brilliant researchers who come to the show to share more about their ideas, their research, their insights with all of us in this community. So always very, very exciting to walk away with some very tangible, actionable insights that we can apply in life and work and can make us better humans in the first place. And of course, better co-workers, better workers, better people in HR. For those of you who are connecting live right now, please let us know where you are connecting from in the world. Just post it in the chat. It would be great to know what everybody is. If you have any questions, any reaction, any insights, anything that you want to share with all of us in this community related to the topic that we're going to be talking about today, please make sure that you use that chat generously. That's why it's there for. Make sure that you post your questions, your comments, your feedback, anything that you may have in mind, as long as, of course, it is related to the topic of the conversation of the day. We're going to be talking today about energy rising, the neuroscience of leading with emotional power. I am very excited about this conversation. And generally, we prepare a number of questions that will be leading and will be part of our conversation during the chat. But I'm particularly excited about the content and the topics that we're going to be talking about today. And I hope that Dr. DiGangi allows me a little bit of flexibility to also talk about all these topics in the context of this month of November being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're going to have a great conversation. Once again, please let us know in the chat where you are connecting from or tuning in from in the world. And if you have any questions, any comments, reactions, insights, feedback, resources, or anything that you want to share with all of us, please make sure that you post it in the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to be inviting to the screen in a second. I'm going to be inviting Dr. DiGangi. She's now with me. Good morning, Dr. DiGangi. How are you?
Hi, Enrique. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. I am excited about our conversation, and I'm not a neuroscientist like yourself, but I have been very passionate about this topic for a long time. I read a few books every year about neuroscience just to keep myself entertained with the latest on all things science of the brain. So I hope
Absolutely.
we talk about that. But before we get there, I would love for you to please introduce yourself to our audience. Let us know more about who you are, the work you've done, and why you wrote this book, Energy Rising.
Well, I'm delighted to be here and I'm happy to answer that question. So, I am a neuropsychologist, and most people have never heard of that. They'll call me a neurologist, they'll call me a neuropsychiatrist, they'll call me I can go on and on. So, a neuropsychologist means I'm a clinical psychologist with specialized expertise in the brain. And my work is really dedicated to the idea of leadership, emotional pain, and emotional power. In other words, the most simple way to say this is life is hard. So
Mhm.
I've done a lot of work and research on trauma, stress, anxiety. So I think all of us in varying degrees, to your point, November is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. None of us are strangers to stress and anxiety, and most of us know trauma as well.
Yeah.
So life is hard. What does it take in the face of that hardness to meet our lives with the most exceptional level of emotional power possible? Now, you asked me how I came to this work, and I actually came by a very circuitous route. So I'll tell you, I have psychology in my DNA. I come from a lineage of psychologists, and I never in a million years thought that I would be a psychologist. But I was really raised to think about the well-being of others. I pay a lot of attention to emotion, for better and for worse. So I started my career doing political work. So I started at the White House. I did some US presidential campaigns, and then I did international development and humanitarian aid work. So the thing that I was seeing, though, that was so fascinating to me is I worked all over the world. I worked in Chicago, I worked in Detroit, I worked in Nairobi, I worked in Argentina, I worked in Nigeria, and everywhere I went, loss always looked like loss. Rage always looked like rage. Hope always looked like hope. Grief always looked like grief. So I started to become very like, if we're interested in change, we only talk about change in the context of feelings, right? It's like
Mm.
we want a better life. Well, what does a better life mean? It means I want to feel better in these ways. How could it be that I was going to these wildly diverse places on the planet, and yet so much of the emotional energy was exactly the same?
Mm.
So I became very, very interested in this idea of the brain as a powerful, honestly, the most powerful engine for social justice. If we want transformation in our lives, we must understand the brain. I just was giving a large keynote address, and I was sort of talking about how it was for a large corporate audience, private equity. And I was citing this research where 90% of companies will undertake change. They want something,
Mm.
they want to change their
Yeah.
team, they want to change their culture, they want to change their leadership. You also mentioned it's the end of the year. People are going to start thinking about New Year's resolutions, how 2024 is going to be different. Overwhelmingly, and this is such a powerful point, overwhelmingly, our efforts to change fail. And by overwhelmingly, I don't mean more than 80% of the time.
Mm.
So the question is why? Now we make up a lot of bad stories. We start to say people aren't motivated enough. People don't want it enough. People aren't accountable enough. People aren't hungry enough. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to think people want change in their life, in their teams, in their organizations, in their homes profoundly.
Yeah.
The question isn't, well, why don't they want it enough? The question is, why are we struggling to make changes in our life? And it's because we're trying to make change in a way that is not aligned with the way the brain works.
Mm.
When you understand the brain, you understand everything.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I love so much reading about neuroscience. If I could do it all over again, by the way, in my career, I would probably become a neuroscientist. I think it's just so fascinating, especially with the advent of technology
Yes.
and all the tools, functional MRIs and all the tools that we have available. But you said before at the very beginning of your introduction, you said something that I think of course, we would all agree with. Life is hard. And the response to that is emotional power. So, or one of the responses to the hardships of life is emotional power. So, would you mind describing what emotional power is?
Absolutely. I'm going to take that question out one step further and
Yeah.
first talk about what is emotion. So, in Energy Rising, I talk about the energy of emotions. And I'm not talking about this metaphysically, I'm not talking about it even metaphorically. Your emotions are neuroelectrical signals from your brain that are communicating with your body and driving your behavior.
Mm.
A very useful heuristic or analogy for thinking about this is your emotions are the Google Maps of your life. They are this exquisite, sort of sacred scientific GPS system, this biological GPS system that is literally guiding you through life, going, at the next intersection, please turn right and immediately leave this job. At the next intersection, please turn right and immediately leave this relationship or immediately get off social media. But what most of us are doing in our lives is we're feeling that emotional guidance and we are doing, so we are feeling in one direction and then we are behaving in the exact opposite direction. So instead of coming to the intersection and immediately leaving the conversation or the job or the social media scroll, what do? We dig deeper into it.
Mm.
Now, if you do this once, twice, 1,000 times across your life, no problem. Your biology is very resilient. But what most of us are doing when we fall into pain in our lives is we are ignoring this emotional neurobiological GPS over and over and over and over again.
We have it on mute, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. We like lost her, like, your like phone like falls like under the seat of the car. You like trying to drive, you can't find the damn phone. So
Yeah.
yeah, this happens. Okay. But the problem with this is if I had to boil all of my work down, I do a lot of work in organizational systems, a lot of work with HR professionals. I do a lot of work in homes. So I really kind of have this expertise in human relationships. People are really asking me, how do I feel better?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll say, how do I become more happy? Or how do I become more confident? Or how do I become more charismatic? So here we come to emotional power. The way that you do this is you integrate the systems of your brain. In other words, you integrate the way that you behave with the way that you feel. So if I feel exhausted, well, then I don't overwork, overgive, overdeliver. I rest. If I feel like it's time to have a difficult conversation, to speak my mind, to start showing up on a blog or on social media in some way, but then I keep my mouth shut, in each of those moments, I have abandoned myself. When we do these things over and over and over again, in other words, we feel exhausted, but we overwork. We want to speak up, but we keep our mouth shut.
Yeah.
Big when I hear people say, I want to start saying no more often in my life, but then we keep saying yes.
Mm.
In all of those instances, these are forms of self-injury.
Yeah. Yeah.
Emotional power is my ability to use my energy to stay with the truth of my emotions.
Mm. You know what's interesting, and let me ask you this in the context of what you're describing right now. It feels as if we know what the answer. You just said it, right? I mean, if we feel exhausted and overworked and overwhelmed, our bodies are sending us a message, and somewhere in our minds and maybe in our emotions, we are like, we need to rest, and we are intentionally overriding
Correct.
that
Correct.
trigger, and we're saying no, because if I rest, then I'm not enough. If I relax, then I am not productive. So why are we overriding the messages that our brain and our heart and our emotions are sending us? Why?
Okay. So we are going to have a very emotionally powerful conversation today. And by emotionally powerful, I mean to have this conversation profoundly, we need to come to this conversation with a lot of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So one of the things I talk about in Energy Rising is this idea of picking a more powerful pain. Okay. Now, at the very sort of primitive level, your brain is wired to avoid all forms of pain. And this is both physical and a mental or emotional pain. So, for example, if I put my hand on a hot stove and I burn it, I'm going to yank my hand away. And we call this in neuropsychology, we call this one trial learning. In other words, that felt bad. So I'm just going to pull my hand away and I'm not going to try again in 15 minutes. I'm not going to try again tomorrow. Like I know that that's going to burn me. The problem with this on the emotional side is if you think this is another really big point that I think can be so clarifying for people. And I believe that clarity is the foundation of all power. When we're honest about our emotional distress, what I keep calling emotional pain, our anxiety, our frustration, our inadequacies, it is always chronic. In other words, it's not the one time in 1999 when your one boss said something that hurt your feelings. It's the same conversations, it's the same engagements, it's the same problems over and over and over. So, what we're trying to do is and there's no shame in this, okay? We're trying to find the pain free option. In other words, maybe if I overwork, this will somehow alleviate my pain. Maybe if I keep my mouth shut, this will somehow alleviate my pain. Maybe if I say yes, even though I want to say no, this will somehow alleviate my pain. But the problem with this, and this is the part of real emotional power, is trying to live a pain-free existence. It makes very good sense at the primitive level. And if we could do it, we should. I'm not an advocate for pain. But trying to escape pain is like trying to escape gravity. So if you came to me, Enrique, and you said, "Hey, Julia, I'm looking for the one house on the planet where there's no gravity." And you tell me, and you were like, "I'm just going to keep looking for it, and maybe one day I'll find it." I would say that's a total waste of your precious sacred energy. The most powerful conversations that we can have are the ones that say, okay, in a world where there is gravity, in a world where there is aging, in other words, in a world where there are difficult truths, not that gravity is that difficult, but I think you get what I'm saying. What is the pain that empowers me the most? So a lot of times what we're doing is we're giving away all of our power to these things that I call the overs. The overs are overworking, overdoing, overgiving, overfunctioning, overcommunicate. I mean, I could go on. And I think a lot of leaders really understand this. But the reason we're overdoing it is always and only because we don't believe in our own worthiness. But here's, I think people are with me at that, but there's this other layer that I really want people to get. I call it the frequency. Let's talk about like the frequency of working is for most of us very, very enjoyable. A lot of us are really turned on by our jobs.
Yeah.
But the frequency of overworking is not about pleasure or desire. It's about fear. Giving is a beautiful act. Overgiving is about fear.
Yeah.
Communicating is a beautiful act. Over communicating is about fear. Okay. Yeah. So when we do these things, we think, you know what? I'm exhausted today, but I really have this deadline. So I'm going to stay up till 2 a.m. My back hurts. I'm exhausted. I'm starting to get sick. I'm going to power through. I'm going to overwork. Here's the thing. Your brain is a pattern detection machine that calibrates based on the evidence you feed it. So I think a lot of people are with me when they say, okay, I understand that I'm overworking, overgiving, over blah, 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 because I don't feel worthy. But the piece that kind of gets missed is because the brain is a pattern detection machine that understands patterns through the evidence we feed it through our behavior. If I overwork until 2 a.m. last night and I wake up to see another day where I survive, I'm not fired, I'm not publicly humiliated in the streets, my brain concludes because of my own behavior, you see, Julia?
Working until 2 was right.
That was the only way to keep you safe. So our most sophisticated models for behavior change, for anxiety management, and there's tons of wonderful psychological, neuropsychological evidence says, if you want to change your relationship with your emotional power, in other words, you want to change your relationship with your life, you need to start coming into a new relationship with how you're interpreting emotion.
Which is breaking the cycle, right? That breaking that cycle of going to bed at 2 a.m., having our brains tell us that was the right thing to do because now you get the work done. See, do it again today, do it again tomorrow because it's paying off, when in reality, it's an unsustainable way of living.
It's totally unsustainable. And then people like to say that emotions are really confusing. Emotions are not confusing at all. They're the most primitive, universal, and native language of every single human being on the planet. Emotions are quite simple. So I call this emotional math. There's sort of a math or a physics to our lives. So if I have this neurobiological energy of emotion, and it requires energy to behave. In other words, I think everyone understands that human beings are made of energy. If I chronically behave in a way that's against my energy, the result of that invariably is going to be disengagement,
Yeah.
exhaustion, burnout, and at the extreme, feelings of hopelessness.
Yeah, and actually, let me ask you this because this is a great sort of segue to have this conversation in the context of men's mental health,
Sure.
because all of that is true for men, plus the context of all these cultural expectations of what being a man means, masculinity, and then so you are telling yourself as a human, true for everybody, like you're saying, if I work until 2 a.m., my brain is going to tell me tomorrow, see, you did the right thing because now you get the reward for working until 2 a.m. But if you're a man, it is, I'm expected to work until 2 a.m. I am expected to be, working 20 hours a day. I am expected to not talk about my emotions and my feelings. I am expected to not be vulnerable. So there's this added context of all these cultural expectations that continue sort of feeding into that cycle that we're trying to get away from.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think that you totally nailed it. I think what you're saying is resonating with a lot of us.
Yeah.
I have so many things I want to say, like my brain's going in a million directions. So I think when people talk about toxic masculinity,
Mm.
there's something that has sort of occurred to me recently. It's like, I don't think toxic masculinity is about the presence of masculinity. I think it's about the absence of this kind of idea, or this, and everything's kind of abstract. Like, I think women have masculine parts and men have feminine parts, but this idea, this concept of masculinity is really about protection.
Mm.
So I think toxic masculinity is about the absence of protection. Okay. So stay with me for a second here. So what happens with this idea of, I'm going to tell a little story here. So it is impossible for a human being, any human being, male, female, anything in between, to be well and to feel unworthy. It's very neurobiological. It's like a human being cannot be well in the world and feel the opposite of worthiness is humiliation.
Mm.
Now, I don't care if you call that unworthiness or shame, or I use the term humiliation. On the neurologic level, these sensations are all the same. Yes. So I was doing a lot of work with combat veterans in particular, and they were coming to me for treatment for PTSD. And as I'm a civilian, and so when these men, they were all men, first started to come to see me, I would, kind of say, like, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what your deepest fear was. Your deepest fear was dying. Like, as
Mm.
mortals, that seems pretty reasonable. But what I started to hear across guys, across conflicts, across continents is like, sure, like I didn't necessarily want to die, but no, that wasn't my greatest fear. My greatest fear was being the guy on the mission that other guys couldn't depend on,
Hmm.
was being the guy on the mission who couldn't protect his friend, was being the guy on the mission who didn't have his gear ready. In other words, what they were really talking about is this energy of unworthiness. You see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this idea of worthiness, when people are really kind of faced with this, and you even hear in some of the global conflicts right now, you'll hear when they, journalists interview people, them talk about how humiliated they feel.
Yeah.
So this energy of humiliation is so powerful. So all of us are working in our lives, we're not just acting when we are humiliated or we are made unworthy. We are acting a million miles away from, like, if we even detect a potential scent of it, the brain is so wired to avoid it. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So it's like, let's go back to this example of overworking. I'm going to stay up till 2 a.m. because this is what I should do.
Hmm.
But the thing about this is, well, there's a lot of things about it. But one of the really powerful ways because I think worthiness is such a big construct. It's like, how do we really get our hands around it? Here's a really powerful question that I think can really help make movement in people. If I want to feel more worthy, a very powerful question for me to ask myself is, Am I willing to be misunderstood?
Mm.
So if I don't stay up till 2 in the morning and I have a joke, my next book is gonna be called Your Mind is an Absolute Hellscape. So if I stay up till 2 in the morning, or I don't, my brain's gonna be like, "You're gonna fall behind, people don't like you, you're the weakest I mean, right? It just doesn't shut
All
up.
the things we tell ourselves.
All the things, okay? So if I say, okay, let me just say, is it true that I don't care about in my heart of hearts, is it true that I don't care about my team? No. Is it true that I do work hard? Yes. If there is a scenario in which other people think that about me, but I don't think that about myself, am I powerful enough to tolerate the
Mhm.
sensation of being misunderstood?
Mhm.
One of the things that changes the game for us, and if we are leaders, this is we have a duty to get this right. That if I am living in a, and I want you to think about this really quick. And by really quick, I mean I know we don't have a ton of time, but this is another really I'm giving you lots.
Which is a crime against the audience that we don't have enough time to talk more about this.
Well, let me just say this. So, what we are doing is we're saying, I'm going to behave in ways that I'm going to get you to think that I'm good enough. But in the process of me over giving and over communicating and over la 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 la, I hate it. And my hate starts to come out as resentment. I start to
Mm.
get passive aggressive. I start to not be able to perform as well because the truth is I am exhausted. And now, because I just gave you something I didn't even want to give you, I start to expect, well, you better do the damn same thing to me.
Yeah.
And this creates this tangled mess of human relationships and human emotions. Okay, so what is now? I think I'm talking to a lot of leaders on this platform.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a great place to kind of, stay with the conversation to the end. The thing that people want on this planet more than anything else is access to their own power. By power, I mean access to the fullness, access to my wholeness. Well, how could I be whole if everyone I look at, and you know how little I care about what's conscious? The brain is doing most of its operations unconsciously.
Mm.
People know. Haven't you ever walked into a room and thought like, "Oh, this person's like really lovely," or walked into a room and thought, "Oh, I don't feel comfortable." They didn't even open their mouth, but you just kind of have a sense, right? Because human beings, we read the energy of emotion. It's our native language. So if I say that I'm a leader and this is why you're hearing so much about authenticity. I am behaving in ways that are not neurobiologically aligned. In other words, I keep abandoning the truth of my own emotional system, and then I say I'm going to set the standard for other people are going to calibrate to that.
Yeah.
But if I start to say, hey, listen, and this is why when leaders and organizations do this, it's so powerful. I'm going on vacation and I'm really signing off. I'm really going to be at my kid's game and I'm not going to be checking my phone in the stands. When I really start to embody that, it's very magnetizing. It's very charismatic. I think people like this word charismatic because
Yeah.
number one, people like to see you do it. But the thing is, you start to give people permission. You become the
Yeah.
evidence that it's
Yeah.
safe for people to do the same thing.
You become the role model.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's this idea, people love to talk about empathy. Neuroscience tells us that emotion is a thing of contagion. The way that we transact emotions, we get it confused. So if I had to boil all of my work down, I would boil it down to this question, which is how do I get people are kind of coming to me in various capacities asking me the single question, which is how do I get these people around me who matter a lot to me in my home, on my team, blah, my customers, whatever. How do I get these people around me who matter to me a lot to behave differently so I don't have to feel feelings I don't like to feel inside of my own body? In
Mm.
other words, I need you to be more accountable. Why do I need you to
Mm.
be more accountable? Because you're frightening me.
Mm.
I need you to be more motivated. Why? Because your lack of motivation is making me anxious. So what we try to do is we try to no one's saying this consciously, but this is what's happening. It's like we try to get inside of other people's bodies and like zing, zing, zoink, zoink, zap, zap their nervous system to try to change their behavior in a way that then makes our emotional system feels better. Can you follow me? Am I
Yeah.
too fast?
Yeah. No, that's totally fine. Yeah. No,
Okay.
it's this is fantastic. I'm just thinking about all the questions that I will want to ask, and I won't have the time to ask them. Ask them.
Well, I don't know if we have a hard stop. I can go a little long. It's totally up to you. But
Yeah, we have about 7 more minutes.
okay.
Yeah.
So if I want to become more a leader that has a good team that feels good inside of my own body, well, I can inspire people, but the work is to really trust how neuroscience tells us emotional energies or emotional currencies are transacted. And it's this: my job is not to motivate other people. My job is to motivate myself and trust that other people will be magnetized by the energy of my motivation.
Mm.
My job as a leader is not to engage other people. It is to genuinely be engaged in my own work and trust the way neuroscience works that people will be drawn to that emotional energy.
Yeah.
And when you think about leaders who've inspired you, none of them have ever been a micromanager. None
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have a couple of options in there. I think one of them is that if you are inspired and magnetized to work with one of those leaders, you will be motivated, you will be engaged. It doesn't have to be perfect, because things happen, but you feel that you want to be there. Alternatively, when you have somebody that doesn't have the kind of energy that you want to have around you, well, now it's up to you. You should be, like you said before, empowered to make the decision to now say, this is not right for me. This is not, there's no entanglement here, because I don't feel that we are in the same wavelength, and I can't work with this person for whatever reason it is. Doesn't make that person right or wrong. It makes just the energy not, connect with each other.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. And I think too, like the more we have conversations like this and the more we understand how human brains operate, the value of emotion, because I think you made a great point. I think human beings are evolving. And in
Yeah.
earlier evolutions, I mean, our parents' lifetime, our grandparents' lifetime, there was a different relationship with emotion. Okay, things change. So I think what you're starting to see, in part because of this rapid advance of artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
is whenever, species only evolve when there's pressure. Well, now the machines have outpaced
Yeah.
our logical intelligences in a lot of ways. So you're watching the world, in part because of, well, in large part because of technology, be pushed into this really profound emotional evolution.
Yeah.
So I think that there's tremendous hope. And I think people want the way your life feels is entirely about your emotion. So people are so motivated to have a different relationship with their emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. DiGangi, we're getting closer to wrapping up our conversation, and I want to ask you one last question to bring us home here. And I think we're gonna have to do this again, because I think there were so many more questions that I didn't ask than the ones that I actually asked. So I'm hoping that we can do this again,
Sure.
on version number 2. But this is my question to you. You said before that people that come to you, they want one thing, right? They want to unleash their own power, right?
Yeah.
They want to release their own power. And that's something that I think when you ask people and you talk to them, they tell you that's what I want. And you tell them this is how you have to do it. And then they don't do it. So they this is what they want. These are the tools to unleash what they want, but they don't do it. You probably talk to them a year later, and unless they really went through a transformation process, maybe they are in the same place that they were when they wanted to unleash their power and they didn't. Why? Number one, why are we stuck in that place of wanting to do something and not doing it, even though we kind of know and have the tools to actually do that? And if you can tell, maybe, I know I don't want to oversimplify, but maybe one or two kind of insights for people that are saying to themselves right now, I want to unleash my power. I know I want to do it. I know some tools, but I'm still in the same place.
Fantastic question. How much time do I have so I can just
Like
kind of think about
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. So here is.
Oh my gosh, I feel awful that I'm doing this with the timing.
No, I think I'm pretty good about time. So we're gonna nail this. So I want to tell you, and I think that was a beautiful question to end with. The reason that I wrote Energy Rising, I am so clear on why I wrote it. And it's this. This is really the thesis of the book. I would encourage you to check it out if this conversation is resonating. Every single thing that you want in this lifetime that you don't yet have is on the other side of the feelings you keep telling yourself you can't feel. In other words, you want more confidence. You need to come into a new relationship with the energy of doubt. Doubt doesn't feel good. You want more peace. You need to come into a new relationship, a more powerful relationship with the energy of uncertainty. Okay. If you need total control, you will never have peace. If you want more influence or you want more connection, you need to have a new relationship with the energy of rejection. These things go together.
Wow.
So I think a lot of times people think one thing has it's the yin and the yang, it's the up and the down, it's the night and the day. It is the head side of the coin and the tail side of the coin. They go together. Now you just asked me, what can we do to change this? It's actually quite simple, which I think is wonderful news. And I think on the physical health side, people see this so readily. So the analog, it's very clear to people. And I think then, therefore, because it's clear, it's like, okay, I can do this. This is very manageable. If I want to get stronger on the physical health side, and I can only lift 5 pounds, the only way for me to do this is to go to the gym and lift 10 pounds. I'm not confused. I don't think, well, maybe if I avoid it more, or maybe if I should think about it more. I should think about, am I ready to lift 10? No, when you're ready to get stronger, you go from 5 to 10. Now, let's say I go from 5 to 15, okay? When I start to do that, I will start to quite literally shake. I have an exercise in Energy Rising. I have lots and lots of exercises, but this one is called Hold Your Emotional Shake. So a lot of us who have ever gone on a walk and broken a sweat or gone to the gym and lifted a lot of weight, we shake. Now, when we're shaking, I think, or sweating, a lot of us don't love that feeling, but there's something very satisfying about it because it is the clearest evidence of our increasing strength. It is exactly the same side set on the mental health or on the emotional power side. So I'll give you an example. I've done now a ton of these interviews for Energy Rising. Now, as an academic, I've gone to a lot of conferences, but at conferences, you have one a year. You spend 11 months preparing for your 20-minute talk. So I couldn't, because there were so many interviews for Energy Rising, which was incredible. I couldn't over prepare the way I was used to. I was like, there's just not enough time in the day. I have patients, I have clients, I have little kids. So I had to say, like, I gotta trust. The foundation of emotional power is trust. So I had to say, I have to start getting on these interviews much less prepared than I want to be. At first, it scared the shit out of me. I would shake, but very quickly, my nervous system habituated to a new level of power. This is not because I'm so special and I'm so unique. This is the way biology responds.
That is the shaking.
Correct.
The shaking.
Yes, I
real
was
time.
shaking. My hands would shake. Sometimes my voice I would get like, you know how your voice quivers when you get nervous?
Yeah.
My thoughts would race. My heart would pound. Like, we all have been there because we all have human bodies. My point here is that now I'm at a new level of emotional power where something, just like if I can now lift 20 pounds, it wasn't that 15 was never hard for me. It's just that now 15 isn't the level of resistance I'm at.
Yeah.
So what happens to most of us on the emotional health side is we start to shake. And because we just don't have the education, that's why I'm very happy to do conversations like these. We think the shaking means it's horrible. It's dangerous. So to end here, this is what I want to say. And please hear me, because it's so life-giving. It's so transformative. The horrible feelings that you hate feeling, fear, anxiety, stress, they are not here to torment you. They are calling you into your next level of power.
I'm just thinking about it. my system here that I use to broadcast this now allows to add automatically a marker on the conversations. I just mark this. I need to go back to this. Dr. DiGangi, thank you so much for sharing all of this with me, with all of us in this community. We have. I think we have to have the second version of this conversation, and we have to pick it up from here, because this is so powerful. And I am hoping that this one sobering thought about the things that are happening, the many things that are happening in the world, gives us some inspiration for action, but also some level of perhaps peace and calm, that these things are not, things that are happening out there are not necessarily meant to make our lives
Correct.
worse, but to
Correct.
hopefully
Set us free.
move us to the next level.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Enrique.
This
It was
was a great
wonderful
conversation. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for version number 2 of this conversation, but the many others that we have in the agenda for you. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday and weekend. And well, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Dr. DiGangi. We'll talk soon.